Welcome back, everyone. Look, if you're a developer operating in the modern CMS ecosystem, you already know that the ground is literally shifting beneath our feet. Today, we're taking a highly structured, step-by-step approach to completely demystify the new Sitecore AI certification exam. We've gathered some incredible insights from recently certified developers, MVPs like Rob Reilly, and the broader community to build you the ultimate playbook. If you're looking to future-proof your resume and really master the composable stack, you are exactly in the right place. Let's get into this explainer. Okay, let's dive in. Our agenda for today: first up, the Sitecore AI shift. Then we'll look at the exam format and specs, followed by the core technical study topics, and wrap up with essential preparation strategies. Section 1, the Sitecore AI shift. Moving to the composable stack. Right off the bat, we actually need to clear up a bit of industry confusion. What exactly is Sitecore AI? Well, it was announced recently, and it's basically the direct evolution of XM Cloud and Stream. It takes content management, customer data, personalization, search, and the new Agentic Studio, and unifies them all into one single AI-first platform. And hey, quick note for you veteran developers out there, this is not the same thing as the old Sitecore AI, with a space from version 10.2. That was essentially just an early feature set. Sitecore AI, all one word, is the entire composable platform moving forward. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the paradigm shift you need to make in your studying. Over on the legacy Sitecore XP side, we relied heavily on traditional MVC architecture and server-side .NET pipelines. But as you gear up for SitecoreAI, you have to map your knowledge to a completely headless world. We are talking Next.js replacing MVC, headless APIs everywhere, webhooks stepping in for those old pipelines, and of course, Agentic Studio taking the reins. It's a massive mental shift. So you might be wondering, why prioritize this specific certification right now? Well, according to active developers and hiring managers, legacy Sitecore XP isn't dead. Version 10.5 is actually on the way. But Sitecore AI is absolutely where the industry is aggressively pushing. If you want to get hired by a Sitecore partner agency today, proving you've got modern headless platform experience, it's basically essential. Plus, it perfectly complements any existing XP or XM certifications you might already have by showing, hey, you're ready for the future. Section 2, Exam Format and Specs. By the numbers. Before we get into the heavy technical weeds, let's ground ourselves on what you're actually facing. The exam consists of exactly 60 questions. And listen, these are heavily scenario-based. You aren't just going to be reciting definitions here. You're going to be dropped into a hypothetical developer scenario and asked to choose the absolute best architectural or coding path forward. The good news? You're given 2 full hours to complete it. For 60 questions, that is actually quite generous. It gives you a solid 2 minutes per question. As we'll discuss a bit later, pacing yourself to actually use this time is incredibly critical. But here's the kicker. The passing score is a steep 80%. That means you've got to get at least 48 out of those 60 questions right. So the margin for error? Pretty thin. And that is exactly why deep, structured study is so absolutely crucial. Section 3. Core technical study topics, what to master. First up, a quick warning for the veteran developers tuning in: do not skip the foundational concepts. Even in this flashy new AI-driven world, the test still heavily covers Sitecore basics. You need to know exactly how template inheritance rules are applied, why and how you should use standard values, and the presentation layer differences between SXA and non-SXA sites. Oh, and the exam will also explicitly test your knowledge on configuring component variants and how they actually surface in the Visual Pages editor. Now, a huge competency you must lock down is rendering strategies. Because Sitecore AI is built heavily around Next.js, you're going to be tested on exactly when to use static site generation, client-side rendering, and incremental static regeneration. A recent test taker noted that the scenarios will often hand you 2 options that honestly both seem technically correct, but one is just clearly superior for the context they describe. You need to know exactly why incremental static regeneration makes more sense than static site gen for, say, a frequently updated blog. Next up, serialization mastery. You need to understand Sitecore serialization inside and out. It's not enough to just use it casually day to day. You have to understand the underlying structure of that Sitecore.json file, know exactly how module definitions are configured, understand those tricky path parameters, and crucially, you've got to master the include and exclude logic for your items. Having real, hands-on debugging experience with these config files is going to give you a massive edge here. All right, let's talk about the real game changer here: Agentic Studio. You really need to understand the difference between the agent types. Standard agents, they're conversational, very flexible, and great for exploration, but they can definitely drift from your desired format. Workflow agents, on the other hand, are highly structured pipelines. You define explicit steps to get reliable, repeatable outputs, like perfectly structured JSON. For pure automation, workflow agents are absolutely your best friend. So let's see how this actually builds into a practical pipeline. When you're creating a workflow agent in SitecoreAI, you generally follow these explicit steps. First, context parameters to normalize the user's input. Second, research and enrichment steps, like, say, pulling in real-time SEO keywords. Third, output generation using strict JSON schemas. And finally, conditional flow control, where the pipeline actually branches based on the data. Remember, you aren't just chatting with an AI here. You are building rock-solid business logic. And speaking of business logic, in Agentic Studio, prompt engineering is essentially your new production code. Literally, you have to treat it with the exact same rigor. The exam is going to touch on best practices here, so be incredibly specific about your JSON format. Use plain language, avoid jargon, use negative instructions. Telling the model exactly what not to do is honestly just as important as telling it what to do. And always version your prompts before you tweak them. We all know models can be unpredictable, right? The final massive technical concept we need to cover is the MCP, or Model Context Protocol. This is the magic feature that transforms Agent Studio from just a neat little AI tool into a full-blown enterprise orchestration layer. MCP is what allows your AI agents to connect directly with external tools and data sources across the entire composable stack. Think Content Hub or your CDP. Understanding how these agents securely fetch and actually utilize that external data is going to be vital for passing this exam. Section 4, Essential Preparation Strategies, Test Day Tactics. First and foremost, you have to get hands-on. Reading the documentation is great and all, but Sitecore MVP Rob Riley highly recommends getting access to a sandbox environment if you possibly can. Go through the actual steps of setting up a local Next.js development environment. Hook up a basic CI/CD pipeline to see how deployments work in the real world. And most importantly, build a custom component from scratch. The physical act of building it will cement those Next.js rendering strategies in your brain way better than just staring at a doc ever will. I want you to listen to this insight from a developer who recently passed the exam. They said, "I changed one answer during review because I missed a single word on first pass. Because the test gives you 2 full hours for 60 questions, there is absolutely zero reason to rush. These scenario questions are meticulously worded. I mean, a single word, like dynamic versus static or client versus server, can completely flip the correct answer. So use your time. Read the scenarios twice. Actually, scratch that, read them 3 times if you need to." When you inevitably hit a really tough multiple choice question, rely on the classic elimination strategy. Usually 2 of the 4 answers are obviously wrong, or they just make no logical sense within the Sitecore framework. Eliminate those immediately. Then carefully reread the scenario, hunting for that specific context clue that separates the remaining 2 options. And as Rob Riley advises, just breathe and relax. If you get anxious, remember, the answer is right there on the screen, just waiting for you to parse it logically. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The CMS ecosystem has definitively evolved. The days of monolithic, purely server-side implementations, they're rapidly making way for headless, AI-orchestrated architectures. Earning your Sitecore AI certification isn't just about sticking a new badge on your LinkedIn. It's about proving you are ready for this new reality. So, the question is your skill set ready for the AI-driven composable stack? Go get into a sandbox, review those Next.js rendering strategies, and start building your future today. Thanks for joining us and happy studying.